7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Oh, this you crazy mother.
Hello, welcome to my channel. If you're new here, my name's Rebecca and you should definitely subscribe for all of that DCP content. There we go. Get ready, there's gonna be so much DCP content. This video has been really important to me. I knew that as soon as I got into the college program that this was something I wanted to do. I watched so many of these when I was preparing for my application, and they're just extremely helpful to figure out how to best market yourself to get into the DCP, so I knew I wanted to make one. Not to brag, but this was my first time applying, and I actually got in the first wave of acceptances that were sent out. So I think I have a little street cred when it comes to giving advice for this. Obviously not all-knowing. The only people who really know what goes on is the Disney recruiters, but stay tuned. I will tell you how I think you can get into the Disney College program. My whole process was 2.5 weeks, and I actually went in with the mindset that I wasn't going to accept an offer if I was given one, which you're really not supposed to do, but it's fine, I accepted it. Just a little timeline for my application. So I applied right when applications dropped, which was on August 20th. They dropped sometime that afternoon. I was actually at work, my last day as an orientation leader here at school, and I had my computer with me. I knew they were dropping that day, so I made sure I had everything ready just to press submit and send it on its way. So about an hour and a half later, I got the web-based interview invite, and I was able to complete that later that evening and schedule my phone interview for August 27th, just 1 week later. My call actually came about 20 minutes early, which I wasn't really expecting, and it lasted for about half an hour. And then after that, I waited a week and a half, and then I got my offer. Super short process, only about 17 days in total. Just blessed. The waiting probably would have killed me. Okay, if you want to apply for the DCP, there are 3 different things that you need to know about, 3 parts of the application. The first part of the application is the initial written application. This happens all online, and it starts with just asking you basic questions like, are you over 18? Where do you go to school? What's your GPA? Stuff like that. And then there's a section for you to describe your work experience, and this is really the most creative part of the application, and I'll talk about that in just a sec. And then at the end, you can rank which roles you would like and how much interest you have in them. These roles are all the jobs that are available to you on the Disney College program. My biggest advice for this written part is, if you can, try and get some cool jobs. So a lot of the people who are applying for the Disney College program, they can all work at a restaurant or in a store. So if you can, try and get cool jobs within your community. So for example, I am an usher at a big arts venue and a tour guide on the National Mall in Washington, D.C. I know that's not a possibility for people in different parts of the country who maybe aren't in like a tourist city, so they don't have opportunities like that. But I encourage you to try and find special, not as common jobs within your own community. It'll really help you stand out among everyone else who's applying to the Disney College program. The best thing you can do for this written part is go to your school's career center or writing center. If you're at a university, they're gonna have some sort of variation of either of these things. So personally, I went to my school's career center and met one-on-one with a career advisor, all included in my tuition. Most schools are like that too, where I was able to sit down with a professional and look over my resume, and she actually helped me word everything properly and professionally. While I was working with her, we realized that the writing space was unlimited, so I could put as much detail as I wanted for each of my job descriptions. So that's what we did. We wrote down bullet points rather than sentences. That's a personal preference. It doesn't matter. You can do it however you like. Within this writing space, do not be scared to get super specific. So for example, I have some of my writing that I actually did on my computer. So I wrote as one of my bullet points, I said, participated with 18 other students in 60 hours of training in customer service, transition theory, and services available from 10 campus departments. So this was for my orientation leader position, and my career advisor told me that I should put numbers and specifics as part of these bullet points. So that's why I say the number of hours, the number of students, and the number of campus departments, just so that the recruiters reading this are able to get a more in-depth understanding of the work I was actually doing, not just by my vague descriptions. Again, do not be afraid to go into as much detail as possible. It'll really help you out. So I forgot to mention that this work experience section is broken into skills and responsibilities. So the section called responsibilities is where I put all of my bullet points with my detailed description of what I did. And then under skills, I just did a list of like buzzwords basically for the skills that I gained from those responsibilities, if that makes sense. In both of those sections, I encourage you to use Disney words. So these are just words that are scattered about different recruiting websites that Disney has put out. And words like the 4 keys, which are Disney's like 4 big ideals that they want all of their cast members to follow. So those are safety, courtesy, show, and efficiency. So I found this online and I did my best to sprinkle those throughout all of my descriptions whenever possible, and like whenever actually made sense. So one example is efficiently responded to campus safety alert regarding severe gas leak, LOL, and relocated 150 students while communicating frequently with 4 student leaders, 2 Office of Orientation staff members. So again, an example of like descriptive writing, but I started out with efficiently, which like I guess wouldn't have to be there, but it's one of those Disney keywords that just sets off a little light bulb and a connection between previous jobs that I've had and the Disney job that I want. Other than the 4 keys, words that you could use would be saying guests instead of customers, or for example, I would used to say attractions a lot when talking about my tour guide job, even if that's not necessarily what I called the stops on my tour, but that's what Disney would connect them as. I'd like to say that this is not cheating, this is just catering to your audience, and that's what you need to do in any sort of job actually. But since Disney has such like defined rhetoric, it's really easy to sprinkle that in. There's some dispute of whether like a real person reads this or if a robot reads it to get you through that first round. I got through within like an hour and a half, so I doubt that a real person set their eyes on it initially. So a lot of people think that there's a like algorithm system that goes through and reads it, so having these keywords won't do anything but help you, at least to get past that first initial stage. The last section on the initial written application is the role ranking. So all the jobs you could possibly have as a college program student are listed, and you can rank your interest in them. So you can either say high interest, moderate interest, low interest, or no interest. So please do not put interest in something that you would not genuinely want to do. I really don't think there's any strategy for ranking them. Obviously, you can use common sense and figure out what jobs are like in more demand, just like they have more positions for quick service food and beverage than they do for like Bibbidi Bobbidi Boutique. So if you're only ranking those like selective roles, you have a less chance, but if you really would die if you had to do quick service, then don't put it. Okay, so the next section after the initial written application is the web-based interview. This is a series of timed multiple choice and agree-disagree questions meant to somehow wean out personality and work ethic. My biggest tip for this is to be consistent. So if one of the questions is agree, disagree, I regularly show up on time to work. And if you put agree, great, remember that. And then if a couple questions later, they ask agree, disagree, I am never late. And if you were to put like, oh, sometimes, or like somewhat disagree, that isn't consistent with what you put before. So just make sure you maintain consistently. The other biggest tip I can give is just to sit in a quiet place and focus. Whether that means reading the questions aloud to yourself, or maybe if you focus better listening to music, doing that. Just make sure that you're in your best possible mindset to sit down and do this, because if you don't pass it, that's it for this application period. Also, as you're doing it, just think, what does a good worker do? What would a good worker answer to this? Hopefully you have the same answer, but don't answer like, oh, I'm always late, because Disney wouldn't want to hire someone who's always late. It's usually better to answer with a strong yes or a strong no. However, I'm a big advocate for like being a real person, even in digital interviews like this. So putting somewhat or like neutral sometimes is okay, but definitely don't overuse that. It's kind of hard for me to get super specific on questions in the web-based interview. I don't really remember it. I guess I was just like so focused and like not thinking about reporting about it later that I don't really remember much of the questions. But my biggest thing is just focus and breathe. And you'll find out right away whether you're moving on to the phone interview or not right after your web-based interview. Okay, so the phone interview, that's the big one. You will schedule your phone interview right after if you passed your web-based interview. I recommend putting a time that makes the most sense with your body clock. So if you're a morning person, maybe do it right in the morning, or vice versa if you're a night owl. This is a 20 to 30 minute phone interview with a Disney recruiter who has the ability to get you the job, put you in your role, and assign you a location. This is definitely the step that I prepared the hardest for. There's so many videos about it. I even recommend after you watch this one, looking for full recordings of people's interviews. I didn't do that just because I didn't want to have it to look back on. Even though it went well, I didn't want to like stress about it, but some people have recorded their whole interview and put it on YouTube. As you are watching these, keep a running list of all the questions that you see so that when it comes time for your interview, you can just read over those questions and think about how you would answer them. Some categories that I found as I was watching all of these videos was roommate and conflict resolution, your past jobs, why the Disney College program, and more like role-specific questions and scenarios. Here are some example questions, and I'm actually going to leave a lot more in the description with a bunch of other notes that I have about the whole application process, but I'll read some of them right now. So ones that I came across regularly were, have you and your roommates ever disagreed about something, and how did you resolve it? Since you will be living with people on the Disney College program, they want to make sure that you're a good roommate. Regarding like why the DCP category, I saw how would the DCP help you professionally, because they don't want people just coming for that free admission. They do kind of want motivated people who would like to maybe do something in the future that Disney helped them get to. A couple questions I saw regarding past work were, tell me about a time where you had to react to an emergency situation and how did you feel and react? And another one was, what was your hardest day at work and how did you handle it? And then there's a bunch of questions circling the interwebs for role-specific questions. One that I had written down for character attendant was, what would you do if a child was scared or nervous to meet a character? So after I had a solid list of questions, I just started to brainstorm and write down bullet points for what I thought I would answer to each question so that I wasn't really stumped. However, I didn't over-rehearse because that can just make you come across really fake. But it was nice to have an idea of what I would say if I was asked that question during my phone interview. This is the most extra thing I did. I actually made a cheat sheet for my interview, so it was just a single piece of paper. Maybe I can attach like a Google Doc version of it in the description, we'll see. But it was a single sheet of paper that had the 4 categories broken up, and it was my key ideas for each category and little like specifics, like if they asked for PhotoPass, like what kind of camera I used. I didn't want to get caught off guard, even though I knew, but if I had like a brain fart, I didn't want to look dumb for not knowing what camera I used, or just other little things like that. I also wrote out like the overarching themes that I wanted to get across in my interview, and specific like really important answers that I knew I'd want to say if I got asked specific questions. I limited it to 1 page, so I wouldn't really need to read off of it. It was just there if I had a brain fart, but I definitely found it comforting to have something to look at during my interview. As you're preparing for your interview, really think about how your past jobs can apply to the work that you want to do at Disney. So for example, one of my jobs, actually the orientation job that I've been talking about this whole time, we had a lot of training on the FISH philosophy, which is like a customer service philosophy, and it's about making their day. What are the other things of it? This is what I wrote down on my cheat sheet, but like I wrote down what the FISH philosophy meant, and it was very similar to the training that Disney does for customer service, so I wanted to incorporate that somehow into my interview. I also talked a lot about making magic and storytelling because that's very important to Disney, especially for more of like the entertainment type roles like character attendant. Also during your interview, don't be afraid to show off your Disney or like parks knowledge. So I actually talked a lot about like how I grew up going to Disneyland. So Disney had always just been a really big part of my life, and my recruiter really liked that. And I know she asked some sort of character host question, and I got really extra about it, being like, you can see Mickey at his house, blah, 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 like over here. And it was better than that, but just like being able to show that you already kind of have a base knowledge for this job that you'd be doing is really cool. If you can, try and catch your interviewer's name. I know it can be kind of difficult. I didn't catch mine. I wasn't really ready for the call. I thought it'd be like 10 minutes later, and I just didn't hear it. But if you can, try and catch it so you can thank them by name at the end of the interview. Okay, I didn't know this, but this is the only time to request a work location and or tell them any accommodations that you'd be needing coming to Disney, whether that's like work accommodations. I know some people have gotten into a sticky situation by having like tattoos on their hand for like they wouldn't be able to work quick service if they had that. So just little stuff like that. And this is the only time to get that done, especially for work location. Okay, so before your interview, give yourself time to just sit and relax and mentally prepare for what you're about to do. For a lot of people applying to the DCP, Disney has always been a dream. I know I've always wanted to work at Disney. So what I did before my interview, I just sat in my room, I listened to Happily Ever After and just like thought about Disney. I looked at some old pictures, really cliche, but it definitely helps me get in the right mindset to showcase myself as a Disney employee. My biggest piece of advice that kind of sums up what I've said all about the phone interview is put in the work ahead of time so that when the time actually comes, you won't be as nervous and you're not hearing any of these things for the very first time for the most part, and it'll really help you stay more focused and centered throughout your whole interview. Also, super cliche, but truly just be yourself and don't be afraid to let your true personality shine through, because that's really what Disney's looking for, real people who can make real magic for their guests. Okay, so after your phone interview, you could hear from Disney anytime between like the next week or months and months later. The waiting process is different for everyone, and everyone moves through this whole application process at their own speed. You won't necessarily follow the exact same path that anyone else does, and that's totally okay. You can always apply multiple times as well. It's not a one and done situation. So if you do get an answer that you're not really looking forward to, don't worry about it, because you can just apply the next season and up until a year after you graduate as well. I truly do believe that everything happens for a reason. I think the DCP is one of those things as well, so maybe the timing is just right at a different point that you weren't necessarily hoping for, but truly, truly everything happens for a reason. That is all the advice I have right now about your application for the Disney College program. Seriously, feel free to reach out to me anytime, even if you're watching this like a year or whatever after I posted it. I'll be around and I would love to talk to anyone who has any questions about applying for the DCP. You can leave questions in the comments and I can do my best to answer those, or follow me on my Dinsta hello at DC to Disney. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video and I'll see you real soon.